Hey, folks, welcome to A Friendly Orbit, the podcast that draws us together no matter how far we fly. I'm Ceres.
And I'm Thea. And Saris, how are you feeling this week?
Lost and confused. I'm in need of guidance from some greater cosmic source that hopefully won't lead me astray in any negative way.
Well, I'm feeling like giving my cat the worst possible name in the world.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
What time is it?
It's time to talk about Lovecraft in Dungeons and Dragons.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Okay, series.
Yep.
Um,
Thea, tell me.
Lovecraft.
Yes.
Famous.
Mm-hmm.
I assume our listeners will have at least a passing knowledge of the guy and like what he's all about.
Famously racist.
Famously racist. Before we get into the topic,
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit of Lovecraft and what a trip his Wikipedia page is.
Yeah.
So essentially, he was born in New England
Mhm.
in 1890.
Oh shit, is he American?
He's American.
Oh,
He's not British. Born
I
very
guess
wealthy.
I'm disappointed about that.
Born very Americans, never racist.
No, Americans are quite often racist. Just sad to add another racist to the long list.
I'm sorry. He is one of you. So, born in a wealthy family
Mhm.
with many businesses.
Mhm.
His dad was internalized when Lovecraft was 3 years old.
Oh, he was like committed to like an.
Yep.
Okay, so he was like considered insane by the
Yeah.
status of the day.
Yeah. And his mother a few years later, too.
Oh, that's pretty traumatic.
Yes. Kind of informs, I feel like, a lot of Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Lovecraft, at the age of 3, he was already very proficient in writing and reading.
That's interesting.
He was quite the mind.
Mhm.
He was very precocious. He was very curious about sciences and anatomy and astronomy. But by the age of 12...
And squids.
What?
And squids.
And squid? No, he was not. He has a deep disgust with everything like organic and visceral.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he described like when he learned he was raised in a Protestant home.
Mm-hmm.
He was not taught about human reproduction.
Uh-huh.
He read about it in an anatomy book.
Mhm.
And then he said that quashed all kind of curiosity he had about the topic forever.
Oh my god.
Yes.
So extremely squeamish.
Yeah, at the age of 5,
Mhm.
he recounts basically abandoning his faith in God
Okay.
and comparing him to the Santa Claus, which was basically at 5 years old, he learned that Santa Claus was not real, and he was like, then probably God is also not real.
It doesn't seem consistent with the world building of this universe.
It's interesting, and I feel like if he was alive today, he would be like a nihilistic Redditor.
Yeah, I mean, oh my god, that's actually such a good. I can envision the entire thing. Yeah. Here's my tentacle fanfiction. Yeah, but we had this a lot when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, not when we were 5 years old, but when we were like 7 or whatever at school, like telling people Santa Claus is fake and was invented by Coca-Cola, which is not true, but that's what we thought at the time.
He was rebranded as by Coca-Cola, but he wasn't
his
invented
colors.
by that.
His colors were rebranded by Coca-Cola in an attempt to make Coca-Cola a winter drink, which worked because it is now also a winter drink. Anyways, I don't know if kids were running around the playground at that age yelling at each other, telling each other God was fake, though.
No, he was definitely like the social kind of pariah.
Yeah.
He actually didn't get an elementary education.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't go to school until later on because of health complication.
Mm-hmm.
He was homeschooled for a long time. And then eventually he actually did go to public school, but clearly he spent most of his time at home.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of informs a lot of his like fiction writing and views. He's clearly very much grown in an isolated and very intellectual environment.
Yeah, it really makes me wonder what he would have been like in the alternate universe with well-adjusted Lovecraft. I wonder what he might have written.
It's interesting, yeah. But he grew up as, so again, family institutionalized.
Yeah.
At the age of, I think, 12, he is following basically a series of financial disasters.
Mhm.
His grandfather, who was basically his father figure
Mhm.
and was also managing the family businesses,
Mhm.
died of a stroke.
Okay.
And so Lovecraft lived basically a series of readjustments that led to worse and worse living conditions.
Yeah.
Which also led to him having kind of like the West is falling, the decadence of civilization kind of outlook on the world.
I'm sorry, because I'm completely out of touch with
Yeah.
Lovecraft. When is this?
This is like the early, like 1900s, like 1900s.
Okay, so right before the golden period of the West.
Exactly.
right before the 80-year golden period of... Okay.
I mean, it feels like at least once per century the West is falling.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
once per century we're witnessing the fall of Western civilization.
I mean, obviously it's an extremely mixed phase in history, but the idea that the West fell is kind of pretty like...
It's very funny. Right before America became...
Exactly, right before World War I and World War II, and America becomes a superpower.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in the Middle Ages, where at any time in the Middle Ages, the Eastern European Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire is declining.
Yeah.
For 1,000 years.
Yeah. We should get into that at some point, although this is not the podcast for it.
No.
The time scales of the Roman and then later Roman rebranded as Byzantine Empire are insane.
Yeah. Anyway, Lovecraft mainly wrote, but like I would say he tried to make it a job, but he often had to take day jobs to support himself and his wife, who was also wealthy, but eventually her businesses also went down.
Wow.
Great Depression.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to say like his family needs like better investment strategies, but the Great Depression that's hard to
difficult. Yeah, that's hard to beat.
Has the word "great" on the front of it.
Yeah, and the word depression at the end of it.
Shit.
More importantly, I would argue. More importantly,
that one. That's the 2-word combo.
But yeah, but like he wrote for Pulp Fiction, Weird Tales. He never became very popular and famous through his lifetime.
Oh, okay.
And his writing of like cosmic horror, which we'll get into, incorporated a lot of elements that were very popular in the zeitgeist of his time, like kind of like the existential dread that came from the progress in astronomy and biology at the time. His fear of the ocean. The guy was afraid of the water, and it shows.
Yeah.
Popularity of occultism.
And by the way, I feel like it's very legitimate to be afraid of the ocean.
No, especially for a guy who never left his home. The ocean must be one of the most terrifying thing in the world.
I'm not very scared of the ocean, but it's not like being afraid of, I don't know, teacups or something. Yeah. You can kind of be like, yeah, well, as a terrestrial evolved animal, you should probably be a little bit scared of being really, really far away from land. That seems like a natural instinct.
Yeah, I mean, when Copernicus is on the pod, they can tell us about it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm not as like thalassophobic as them, for sure. Anyways.
Well, but yeah, neo-paganism, he kind of described himself as a neo-pagan as well.
No, why?
Yes.
I don't want him.
I'm sorry.
Take him out of my neo-paganism,
and
though.
Orientalism. Like, I need to double check this, but basically, after reading 1001 Nights, he adopted an Arabic name for himself, which later he repurposed in his myths.
This guy is such a fucking Redditor.
Yeah.
This guy is like a weeb. But for what's a weeb for Arabic culture?
that's kind of literally what it is, because like Oriental, like the fascination that like an Orientalism that you experience today, arguably against like towards East Asian countries. Back at the time, it was towards Middle Eastern countries. But yeah, he basically adopted the name, which later he repurposed in his mythology to be the name of the author of the Necronomicon.
Okay.
Abdul al-Hazred, a name he later used for the author of the Necronomicon. But yeah, I love this. Over the course of the next few years, he was introduced to Grimm's fairy tales and 1001 Nights. favoring the latter. In response, Lovecraft took on the identity of Abdul al-Hazred, a name he later
my
used.
God.
I know. Incredible.
I just have, oh my God. That is so not okay and so fucking weird. Why
It's
would
really-
you though?
I told you, this Wikipedia page, man, it could be an entire episode of its own.
That is so
Yeah.
crazy.
Lovecraft experienced a brief period as a Greco-Roman pagan shortly thereafter. According to this account, his first moment of skepticism occurred before his 5th birthday, when he questioned if God is a myth after learning that Santa Claus is not real.
Wait, so he was a neo-Roman pagan as a child?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No,
All
this.
right.
I mean, it looks
So
like.
it feels like really like Lovecraft was like a person with an inquisitive mind and an incredibly reduced pool to draw information
Yes,
from.
yes.
I mean, the fact that 1001 Nights isn't bad, but the fact that it took over his life to that extent, I feel like reveals that like this man has read like 4 books.
I mean, listen, it was his like Dark Angel 69.
Oh my God, yeah.
His version of, that embarrassing email account that like you don't really want to talk about.
So was he like racist ever since he was 5, or
I mean, the thing
did
is,
he have like a moment where he joined
No,
the?
I mean, he was raised in a racist environment.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, he was racist since he was 5, probably sooner than he was 5.
But wasn't he? I mean, I don't know if this is true, but what I've always heard is that he was racist even for his time.
He was, yeah. I mean, he was a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
So for his time, like he was raised in a conservative environment. He was Republican, which apparently already back then was like the conservative party. Because like I'm a bit ignorant about like how the two parties changed over time in the U.S.
Yeah.
But from what I read, basically the Republican Party at his time was already the racist
I think that's true. Yeah, the conservative liberal sort of shift between the Republican and Democratic Party did happen after the Civil War. I think. Well, it has to be after the Civil War, right? Because Abraham Lincoln brings the Republican Party or starts it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was definitely a switch at some point there, but I think it's pretty far in the past at this point.
So now this is kind of like on his life.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about politics and racism.
Oh, okay.
Because this is a separate.
All right, so this
bullet
is the whole section dedicated.
Yeah, this is a
to...
part where we talk about
Okay.
That part, the cat.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the cat. No, we're not going to talk about the cat. But yeah, Lovecraft is, as you said, known to be very, very racist. A couple of bullet points just to clarify exactly what we're talking about. He did believe in the superiority of British descent, like blood-wise.
Okay.
Believed very much in the superiority of the races, and often represented, obviously, non-white cultures in his work as savage and dangerous, and the most prone to basically worshipping evil or monstrous gods.
Okay.
He was very much also elitist about separation of social classes, and did not believe in representative democracy, but rather believed in the idea of the enlightened aristocracy. Again, as I said, he very much comes across as a man who basically lived in his house with his books.
Yeah.
And like that was his world. The servants, the books, the family, the I mean, he wasn't Protestant on a religious level, but like that kind of
Cultural.
higher class upbringing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He was a WASP.
I don't know what that means.
A white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Oh, okay.
It's like an ethnic cultural designation used especially in the U.S.
Yeah. And this was him, like, probably, like, it's safe to describe him in the first 30 years of his life. Probably just like, that was him. Notably, on the racism and side, he did have kind of like a shift towards the better. First, going from the more eugenics style British descent, blood descendants, towards adopting a more cultural attitude towards it.
So he matured the way racism matured in our timeline.
Basically,
going from like racialism to culturalism. It's not in their genes. It's just their culture is incompatible with positive values.
Like he was critical of Hitler for putting too much emphasis on the blood descendants and having to put more emphasis on the cultural distinction.
That second part kind of is what really tanks him.
Yeah, he described his wife, who by the way was Jewish, as well assimilated.
Oh no,
well assimilated woman.
I feel very sorry for that woman. Run.
Yeah. But apparently towards the very end of his life, which was in his mid-40s,
it's crazy to me that he lived that long.
Yeah.
He's always felt to me like one of these, like, I don't know,
tormented.
I'm totally gonna get put on blast now, but like I think Van Gogh died young, right? And I'm like he feels like that kind of like this guy was never quite right in his head.
He died of lung cancer. He died like in his mid-40s.
Yeah.
It's pretty sure. Yeah, 1937 or something, 39. Yeah, we're getting there. But yeah,
that would have been really interesting because if you're saying he was shifting towards being
he was
like less conservative or less racist as time went on,
both.
It would be interesting to see like if he'd lived 15 years longer and he'd seen the culmination of World War II and the Holocaust, how his opinions might have shifted then. That because I feel like that could have really impacted.
I mean, that's arguably that's something what happened to basically the entire West.
Yeah, like, exactly.
It's not just him.
Yeah, but I think it would be interesting to see his, maybe he would go back and revise some of his stories.
I mean, honestly, I would just be happy to see what Lovecraft would have done after the atomic bomb.
Oh, you think that would have been featured in his writing?
I don't know. The power of the atom and radioactivity, that feels so like that's like the rock that makes you sick and slowly kills you.
Yeah. Well, and also what you said before that, just like the sheer power that like an atomic bomb has, is like, if you're writing about cosmic incomprehensible powers, here is
right
one.
There. It's right there. Yeah. Not only that, but like he also got better. Also, like the cultural thing also got better after he took a trip to Canada, and he visited the Quebecois area and like visited the local native like
this is so
cultures,
fucking predictable.
The First Nations.
This is like the parts how always the most racist parts of a country are the parts of a country that have the least minorities. You know what I mean? Exactly. And then he met somebody from one of these so-called inferior cultures, and he thought, oh my god.
Yeah, and then
he's like a straw man conservative.
Yeah. And then he went there, and then he write basically like, the world would be better if basically like the French were more French and the Spanish were more Spanish, etc. Kind of, like he probably didn't want to like write it explicitly, but I think he definitely visited other cultures like, these people are actually fine. Yeah. And maybe it's even the world would be a better place if every culture had a place at the table.
Yeah, it's like that form of nationalism that like Harari writes about in his book, where he's like, there's sort of this nationalist waltz where it's like everybody should just do their thing and not interact with anybody.
Yeah.
And he goes, but the problem with the nationalist waltz is it's 2 steps further to, and my nation is the best of all of them and should interact with everyone else by killing them,
Yeah, exactly.
He kind of did the reverse almost in a way.
Yeah. And politically, as I said, remember I said aristocracy, no representative democracy, very much against...
Anti-democratic,
Anti-democratic, hard conservative, Yeah. I'm just going to read this from Wikipedia.
Okay.
About the Great Depression. Initially, he thought that affluent people would take on the characteristic of his ideal aristocracy and solve America's problem. When this did not occur, he became a socialist.
Oh my god!
I love how like open-minded this man is. Like as soon as he like gets exposed to a shrink of evidence, he's so willing. He's so willing to change his mind.
It's so fucking stupid. This man has all these. He's just never encountered reality. He has all these opinions based on not interacting with reality.
Seriously, Lovecraft.
But it's also such a crazy shift. So by the end of his life, he was a racist socialist, whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, basically, he was still not like...
I guess that actually was a thing at the time, right? I mean, the Soviet Union was pretty racist, especially early on under Stalin. So a little later, that would come back.
Yeah, I mean, basically, he was very much anti-Soviet. Like, he wasn't a pro-Soviet socialist.
Yeah.
But he kind of started to, he definitely didn't believe in, this aristocracy anymore. Actually, economic-wise, he became quite left-leaning, promoting a lot of things that I would say quite until today are considered progressive in America. About the redistribution of wealth, about shorter working times, better wages for workers, and protections, like protection of work by the government. But he also still retained his ideas of having a bit of an intellectual oligarchy made of bourgeois intellectuals instead of aristocratic. So the shapes remain, but he fills them up with different.
It's so crazy just because he's got strong opinions about politics and none of them seem like they would work, and they're just sort of kludged together out of life experience. It feels like whatever he's most recently experienced, he's like, now I've understood all of reality and this is definitively how we should act.
He's kind of in that way he's like Jace from Arcane. Like the last person who whisper in his ear basically has his undivided attention. it's very interesting. But again, like, he was very much an intellectual prodigy in many ways, and when you read about his childhood and like his interest with science and how quickly he was ready to shed his like his spiritual and moral preconception from his upbringing as soon as he opened like a science book. He was like, I guess the Protestant God doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But his lack of curiosity towards other humans and other cultures basically is what prevented him to like shed his political and social preconception.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to read this whole thing. You're like, what could have been?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like most of his most vitriolic ideas are fueled by ignorance.
Absolutely.
And
exactly, there was like this man, genuinely, like his convictions, I would say, were paper thin.
Yeah, they seem to shift pretty radically.
He was so ready to like because obviously after the Great Depression, suddenly America didn't just turn socialist, but he did.
Yeah,
he was willing to look at the situation and go like, I guess my beliefs are not grounded in reality, because reality didn't behave according to my beliefs. So I need a new belief system, and that was interesting. But yeah,
he wrote
still very racist.
He wrote stories. They became famous. They founded a genre.
He founded a genre. Yeah. Also,
and we can
very
still
interesting.
Pretty much universally condemn his political beliefs.
Very much. I would say his views got better in his later life, notably in the 1930s. Too bad he wrote most of his famous work in the 1920s.
Yeah.
He wrote...
but even so, most of the stuff he believed at the end of his life was still pretty...
I mean, yeah, but like, I mean, it's hard for me to like put it in like the cultural context of the time.
Yeah.
Like, was he pretty good for his time at the time? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah,
but like,
exactly.
he sadly...
It sounds to me like he was awful for his time, and he got somewhat better for his time.
Yeah,
but he was still awful by today's comparisons, and probably also awful again. Like if Hitler at the end of his life had said, "I regret it all," you wouldn't be like, this man died a morally good person, right? You would take their life on balance, and you would go, all right, so overall, on average, Lovecraft was definitely pretty bad, and maybe you can make an edge case argument that by the time he died, he was normal for his time and still bad for today.
Exactly. I don't want to redeem him. I just wanted to say what could have been. In a different world, what could have been.
Yeah, like well-adjusted Lovecraft, who, used his family fortune to travel all the 100 and whatever countries. And then, well, what could have been?
What could have been? At the time, probably fewer countries, most of them still colonies.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, if he was well-traveled and well-adjusted, maybe he would have written something. I mean, who knows? He might have written, like, fucking detective stories or whatever, romance novels.
Yeah.
He might have been...
But then we wouldn't have mind flayers, which brings us to the actual topic at hand.
Okay, yeah.
D&D.
D&D.
And Lovecraft. Now,
is this going to start with a history of Gary Gygax and how racist he was?
No, I don't have time for that. What I'm going to go is the episode, the Strawman episode podcast listener right now who goes, just play Call of Cthulhu, they say, waving their hand.
Yes.
And I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree with them too, kind of.
Yeah, I agree with you. But say aberrations exist in D&D.
Yeah.
They're a big part of like the monster manual.
Yeah.
Some of the most iconic monsters of D&D are aberrations.
I actually played a little bit of Call of Cthulhu.
Perfect. I can't wait to hear.
Okay.
I mean, I know a little bit about it,
all right,
but I'll be looking forward to hear what you have to say about it. And also, mind flayers literally look like tiny Cthulhus.
Yeah, they do.
So clearly, someone in the D&D writing room thinks that Lovecraftian horror has a place in D&D.
Yeah.
And now we can talk about how it can and how it cannot fit in it. I think the first most uncontroversial statement to say is Lovecraft is not just like it can be, is a like his body of work is cosmicism. It's the horror genre based on the idea that humanity doesn't matter in the grand scale of thing, and it's all rooted in the idea of monsters and entities that aren't just malicious as they often are in horror, but just indifferent to humanity's existence, so powerful, so alien that through their existence, without any malicious action towards humanity, that is enough to completely destroy lives, to kill people or make them insane forever.
Yeah, it's incredibly telling that his definition of horror is essentially the unknown. It's the horror of the unknown and the incomprehensible.
Exactly.
With a lot of like those are a lot of the high level concepts. A lot of the day-to-day themes are
Mhm.
like slow and creeping corruption, insanity that develops slowly over time,
Yeah.
like worship of these sort of elder gods and drawing evil
A
knowledge
big
from
one
them.
is knowledge,
Yeah.
and the idea that there is a certain level of knowledge that humanity is just like not ready for, not
Yeah.
meant to learn, and that delving deeper into that kind of knowledge inevitably leads to like destruction of the self,
Yeah.
to madness, because the human mind is just not equipped for that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
And I think maybe somewhat unlike other genres of horror, cosmic horror uniquely tends to take this sort of form of an investigation. Part of making them feel so alien is that they often start very, very mundane. I don't know. I think there's other horror genres that
I
are
don't know.
more.
I think horror as a whole usually starts mundane.
Mm.
Like even Alien, by Ridley Scott, it
Yeah.
starts as a bunch of essentially workers who
Yeah.
are maneuvering a big cargo ship.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that's like a statement you can make in general about horror. What I feel the difference between like a 1930s like cosmic horror investigation and like Ravenloft
Mhm.
is like in Ravenloft, the horror is very obvious and it's right there. It's right on the tin. We live in a awful, bleak landscape that is ruled by an evil vampire, and there's lots of evil monsters here, and you never know what's hiding in the woods. But like you know that the supernatural is real and that you're fucked because of it, right? Whereas like cosmic horror is like, no, it's the real world and it's all in your head. You're kind of crazy, man. If you think that you saw it, I mean, there's no way that. And then Act 3 is like, blah, it's real. Oh my fucking god. You know what I mean?
It's actually quite interesting that you brought up Ravenloft, but
Mhm.
I think that you kind of like got it a little bit backwards. Like you made a good observation, but I think that like
Mhm.
it's not. I don't think it's fair to say that this structure of you start with the mundane, you investigate, and then you find a horror
Mhm.
is a unique trait of Lovecraftian horror, of
Mhm.
cosmic horror. I would rather say that it's a trait of modern fantasy and of modern fantasy horror
Mhm.
to kind of have an entire horror setting,
Mhm.
because that kind of goes hand in hand with the modern fantasy idea of Tolkien of creating a fictional world to set your world in,
Mhm.
which existed before as well, but has been kind of popularized, I would say, through Tolkien.
Mhm.
And then eventually you go from doing that for fantasy to doing that for the horror genre.
Mhm.
Because, even Stephen King,
Mhm.
the vast majority of Stephen King novels
Mhm.
are set in our normal world. And if there is a fake secondary world, it's often like a parallel dimension to our world. So I would say that it's rather like the Ravenloft example is quite unique to
Yeah.
the modern fantasy, and that also reflects in like one of the reasons why Lovecraft is probably hard to implement in D&D is because D&D is based often on a setting that is already fantastical.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's an important point. So this is probably a difference that has to do with like modern skepticism and understanding of reality affecting
Yeah.
old versus new stories. Where in an old story, I can tell you, yeah, this guy in Germany, they figured out how to make people alive, and now that's just it,
Mhm.
and you just kind of buy it. Whereas, and maybe even older stories than that, where it's just like, yeah, and fucking dragons came out of the hills and they killed them all,
Mhm.
Whereas today, uh, you know, I have to grip you with reality first, right? You're more skeptical. To make it seem horrific, it has to feel like it's your world, right?
Yes,
To contrast, to make the cosmic horror horrific, it has to feel like you're losing your grip on reality. Like,
Yeah, exactly. In a world that has already accepted that the world of the Fae is real, if I tell you that like there's a creature that like lives in the wall and like eats your brain at night, like probably.
yeah,
Sounds like I should call someone to get rid of it.
yeah, it sounds like another Fae.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
maybe the right way to put it is that it's like the horror of the unknown, in the sense that it asks the question, how horrific would it be if the world didn't work according to knowable principles that you can manipulate and interact with?
Yeah.
What if the principles that govern the world were inherently unknowable? And like in a fantasy setting, that's like, yeah, buddy, it's Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah, I was about to say.
Halor hates me and he ruined my crops,
Exactly. And so that's one big issue that I would argue as part of the difficult and adaptation.
Yeah.
Another one, the agency issue.
Mm-hmm.
Necessarily, Lovecraftian horror does not end well and is not a setting of heroes with agency.
Yeah.
It's a setting of people who delve in too deep, or read a story about a guy who delved too deep, and either way, usually the story ends with, well, that happened. This guy went crazy,
Yeah.
and there's nothing
And
we
no
can
one
do
ever
about
saw
it.
him again.
No one ever saw him again.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and that's, I think, one of the ways where I would highlight the difference between many modern like horror games. For example,
Yeah.
when I played Call of Cthulhu, I played one adventure,
Mhm.
and at the end of the adventure, I was like, "All right, so do we level up now?" Right? That was my experience with D&D, and the DM was like, "No, not really. You just kind of." And I'm like, "But I survived. I had gotten lucky, or maybe I had been smart, whichever. I had survived, and I was actually quite proud of it. So I wanted to reuse this character." And so I was like, "Well, don't I get anything for surviving? I beat the challenge. Don't I get to level up?" And he's like, "No, normally you just kind of like play characters until they die." And like you got some injuries during this adventure, and you would accumulate further injuries.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
and
Until you go
eventually your
completely
character's
crazy.
used up, and then you would roll up a new character. And that was for me a huge culture shock, because I was a kid. I'd only ever played D&D, and I was like, what the heck? And so that's where I would say, how does cosmic horror not fit with D&D? Well, one of the biggest ways is that about 3/4 of the rules text in D&D is how your guy gets cooler and stronger as time goes on. And that is not really compatible with this idea that the stakes are often that the person you are following is dying or is going to go insane,
Yeah.
right? And you cannot bring those stakes to a D&D game unless, I mean, you can, but you're just not using most of the game.
Mhm.
Either you're constantly rolling up first level characters and they die, which means you're not using most of the rule book, or you're constantly rolling up high level characters, which is very time intensive, and you're still not getting the experience of playing a character from first to ninth level. That whole sense of progression and heroicism is kind of a lot of the point of what the game of D&D is trying to give you. It's like, this is a leveling class-based game. What are you talking about?
Exactly.
You can't die. And if you can't die, then, I don't know, that's the gimmick. In horror movies, most of the cast dies. At least it's common.
Yeah.
Like, what if in Lord of the Rings, Aragorn was the only one left alive at the end, and he was the final girl? You know what I mean? It would be a very different story. It would feel very different. So
For sure. Oh no, for sure. And that's I think probably the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Another issue is just like tone. That's maybe a conversation that is partially related to the game that we're playing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But D&D is not fun if it's a constant, dreadful slog. If you're always worrying for your life and you are terrified because you're surrounded by forces that far outclass you.
Yeah, it can get draining.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Well, I mean, if only I had a practical example for this, but I don't.
Yeah,
But yeah.
Our home game has been a little like this, and this has been you basically read me the feedback I gave him last week.
Yeah. But no, that is absolutely true. Like in a Lovecraftian story, you cannot have easily defeatable minions.
Yeah, at least it just you could, but it doesn't feel like horror. Then you tangibly interacted with the cosmic horror. Like, often, I feel like one of the things about cosmic horror that define it is the monster is so alien you can't interact with it.
Mhm.
So helplessness. There is nothing you can do. But if I can stomp 5 swarmlings or whatever, then at least I can visualize at least a world in which I succeed.
Yeah, like in Lovecraft, the monster doesn't have a stat block.
Yeah.
Like in one of Lovecraft's most famous short stories, it's called "The Color Out of Space."
Uh-huh.
It's just about an asteroid that hits a little town in I think Great Britain or New England or somewhere like that, and just like hits it, the little town, hits the well, falls in there, attracts a little bit of attention from like the local scientific community, and this asteroid kind of like has a shimmer, has like they can't figure out what it's made of. It has a shimmer, it has a unique color that they cannot describe, and then like they collect some samples, and like it's all from the point of view of the scientists observing this. So it's like then they come back and like the meteor has shrunk by a lot.
Oh,
like
wow.
It's basically like decomposing, it's falling apart, it's very soft and it's falling, it's entering the water.
Yeah.
And before soon, like the nature, this village, the crops get weird, the animals get weird, and then the people get weird.
Yeah.
And before you know it, the creatures are falling apart, they're turning to dust, and then people going crazy, people also turning apart, and then eventually it's just like there is no monster here even.
Yeah.
It's just like this thing, it's in the water.
Yeah, there's
It's
nothing
in the
you can
land.
defeat here.
There's nothing you can defeat here. There's nothing. All you can do is observe in horror and hope that it won't get worse. And inevitably it gets worse.
And here's the thing. If there is a way to interact with it, if there's just a druid purify food and water spell, that they can just cast and it actually just works, then it's not cosmic and incomprehensible.
It's not at all.
Then it's the same as, then it's just aliens.
Yeah,
but
the
it's
goblin
not,
or the goblins poisoned the well. It's
exactly.
The same thing.
It's not cosmic horror anymore because you can easily interact with it. And I think that's part of the problem in D&D, is that D&D as a rule system lays out a pretty comprehensive way how the planes and the magic within the planes and the magic that characters can wield works. And so it's a pretty, from a world building concept between hard and soft, D&D is a pretty hard system where it's like counterspell can counterspell third level spells and second level spells and first level spells without a roll, and above it requires a roll. Ninth level counterspell, nothing can be cast that couldn't be affected by a ninth level counterspell.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. Right? And so because these elements are known and they're known to the players, it's hard to make horror out of how this incomprehensible thing. The only way to do it, I think, is to break all the rules.
Yeah. So here I have a couple of ideas about the different ways that cosmic horror is implemented in D&D. And I'm going to start with the one that you basically just mentioned, break all the rules.
Yeah.
And here where I bring up psionics, your favorite topic.
Yeah.
So at this point in the evolution of D&D, psionics is either just like magic,
it's basically
but different.
Yeah.
It doesn't have its own separate rule system from magic. Most classes just have psionics, but the concept of having a separate form of supernatural force, which the players do not have access to.
Yeah.
And if as the DM you just kept it completely behind the screen.
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, oh, you can detect magic. It's not magic.
Yeah.
All your anti-magic stuff, it's useless.
Yeah.
This squid monster will eat your brain.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I feel like that would give you a sense of horror. And there's a moment actually in one of the Exandria Unlimited shows where Brandon Lee Mulligan did a moment like this. It's not exactly a moment that highlights cosmic horror, but it highlights breaking the rules. A guy basically tries to cast a spell on Asmodeus to uncorrupt him, right? To try and save him. He's playing like this paladin character who sees the good in sort of everyone and is trying to save him even in the last moment. And he goes, cool. He casts Counterspell as a 9th level spell. And then he casts Time Stop. And then he tears all the flesh on your bone. And then he casts full 9th level regeneration and puts it all back. And so you go, oh shit, he just cast 4 9th level spells. Nobody can do that. That's not how the rules work. You don't get multiple 9th level spell slots like normally. From a player's perspective, you're like, oh, there's nothing I can do about this.
But he is a god. So
but he is a god, right? So it makes sense. But that's my point. You need to break the rules like that. I feel like you need to do things where it's your magic doesn't interact with this. Your spells don't work against this. Your counter spell doesn't work because this is a 9th level spell, for example, right? That's how he breaks the rules there. I'm not saying you have to do it exactly like that, but it's that kind of moment where you have to be monsters don't play by the same rules players do. A very small corner of this world. How PC magic works.
Yeah.
And everything else,
yeah, exactly.
I made that shit up.
Exactly. So you cannot, if you need to present them with a horror of the unknown, if the supernatural is already mundane in the world of D&D, you cannot just present them with the supernatural again. They've already done this.
Yeah.
So you cannot give the creature a stat block that they can attack.
It definitely can't be a monster, especially that they've seen before. You have to find some kind of device. Either they've never played D&D before, and you give them limited access to the player's handbook. You carve out portions of the player's handbook and the monster rules that you hide from them, that they do not have access to, and you just have players who are willing to play along. Because, sometimes they're like, oh, okay, I recognize that spell, that Witch Bolt or whatever. But maybe for some players, they can still have fun pretending they don't know it, playing a character who's never seen that before, right? There's that element. Or you have to make stuff up.
Yeah.
all three are kind of different. Like, you can see how all three are kind of not using the game out of the box. In one, you need to invent a cosmic rule system of how stuff works that the players don't have access to. And in the others, you need to artificially, selectively only present them with certain information from the book.
I'll challenge you in your first spot that you have to make up a system for how stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. You just need to make their stuff not work and present them with narratively engaging alternatives, but you don't have to have a system for it. You have to have an idea of a narrative that you want to present to them.
Well, so here's the thing, right? If you want it to work within the 5e rules, you have to have some amount of game designer knowledge and balance knowledge, right?
Yeah.
If this is the first monster they ever fight, and it has an attack that automatically hits and deals 7,000 psychic damage, you can't do that, right?
Of course.
So you have to figure out what damage types should I be using, what effects. You kind of have to work with the rules a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you don't have to make like an intricate like Brandon Sanderson magic system to make it all make sense and be like coherent in its own world. It obviously doesn't need to be coherent. The whole point is that it's ununderstandable.
Exactly. Like it cannot
But you have to make custom spells, custom stat blocks.
Sure.
You have to make it sort of work. And that is extra work.
What I'm saying is you cannot make a system that the players can kind of reverse engineer and figure out, because when they do, it stops being cosmic horror.
Yeah. You have to kill them basically if they figure it out. Like if a character
The
starts to
player or the
learn
character?
Yeah, you gotta take your player into the back room, pull out the ritual knife. And
That's when you take the player, you bring him to the back room. You don't pull out the ritual knife immediately, but you do have a conversation with him.
Yeah. So that's
and you threaten them with the ritual knife.
Okay. Remind me not to play any cosmic horror campaigns with
you. Already
are.
But yeah, so that's definitely like the idea of like breaking the rules.
Yeah.
Is one way. The other one is the solution that kind of D&D does. It's not like a thematic genre.
Mm-hmm.
It's the aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I'm gonna slap some tentacles on this monster.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make it a big brain with tentacles. Lovecraftian horror. Easy peasy. Nice and done, baby.
Yeah.
CR2 creature.
Yeah. I actually listened to a podcast that was played in 5e D&D with some homebrew that played in this cosmic horror space. And so the gimmick was these are paranormal investigators that were themselves elements of horror. Like one of them was a ghoul and the other one was like this Frankensteinian like Stitcher and stuff like that.
Okay.
I never listened to the whole thing. I sort of fell off at some point.
It's the Blade kind of style of like you're a monster who hunts monsters.
Yeah.
Or like The Witcher or like
exactly. And that conceit of being a paranormal investigation agency and one of them was a telepathic cat. Yeah, well, they could like shapeshift, and I think this was like Lovecraft. Actually, I don't know.
What's the name of the cat, Leo?
No, that's not what I mean.
What's the name of the cat?
But they could like shift into like the cat plane, which was like this dream plane of cats, and I it sounded from the way they talked about it like this was just like no one batted an eye at this. Nobody was like, whoa, that's fucking crazy. So yeah. I guess that's like an established cosmic horror trope or something like that.
No. The closest reference that I have is that one animated episode of The Sandman, the last one, where it's about the Sandman, but like his fragment for cats, because each one of the endless ones, like death, etc., like they all have different aspects. So like we always follow the human aspect, but there's a cat aspect of Sandman.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways.
But yeah, that was sort of their conceit to trying to make it work. And a big part of it was to stretch out the narrative. So we imagine horror stories are often like short one-offs and then people die, but they really kind of just try to stretch it out. So each job that they took investigating was all kind of this part of this bigger picture and part of this bigger web, you know? But they also definitely did a lot of what you're talking about, where they took a normal city and they painted it in sort of horror tropes and aesthetics. Like the supernatural was to some degree mundane because there's just ghouls that just live in the city and people know about them. And
exactly.
They use them for corpse disposal or whatever. They're the undertakers of the city,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's that like we demystify the supernatural and we make it so mundane that it's kind of like it's part of the social construct of this world that you have ghouls that eat dead bodies.
And then at the same time, you take some more cosmic horror elements and you make them part of these investigation jobs. And the idea is each investigation job doesn't really lead to much of a conclusion. the human part of it you can figure out, so to speak, but the cosmic part of it, you don't understand the motivations or what's happening. But it's kind of feels like it's all tying into some bigger plot, some bigger picture. And, maybe you can bring those horror stakes back by saying, well, at some point in this plot, in this larger extended adventure, in this 9-level adventure or whatever, you could easily die at some point. But yeah, it's a merging, it's a hybridization, but it's definitely like, if you want to tell a short, snappy story where the point of the story is watching your character go insane and die, and that's the fun of it,
play Call of Duty.
That or just play a game or any other horror game that's suited to that style of play. But the point is, that's not what their game was serving, right? Yeah. Their game was serving this long form. They were invested in their characters and stuff like that. Part of a horror story is not being so invested in your character and being like, I remember hearing about somebody's Call of Cthulhu game where like they were investigating this submarine at the South Pole. I think it was a Soviet research mission, but they were like on an American sub, and they'd arrived there in the Soviet sub, like everything's dead, and it's like, oh, there's some monster here up at the North Pole, right? And I'm imagining if I was in that game and I was playing like, some, sir, yes, sir, military jarhead, I'm going with my rifle. Of course, I'm not like super invested in this character and how they think and who his dad was or whatever. I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to show initiative. I'm really going to push the plot forwards, even though it's super stupid for me to do so. When we see the monster, I'm going to shoot it with so many bullets, and it's going to fucking eat me, and it'll be a delight, right? I will play my character.
Yeah, you bring the expectations in for your game.
Exactly. And like D&D is like just not the right system for it from that perspective. It's so hard to kill characters. You invest so much in characters. It takes so much to roll up a character. In a good horror system that churns through characters, it better be easy to roll up characters, right? Because that's the other part that you said about everything being known, right? A creature appears out of midair. Oh, so like Misty Step or something like that? Yeah. I have that. I'm an Eladrin. You know what I mean? It's like...
they speak into your mind. Oh, like, I speak it back with my ability, with my talent.
Exactly, like the message cantrip? No, like scary. Okay?
I'm actually a great old one warlock, so for my character, this is really not very surprising at all.
Exactly. They speak to you in some forbidden alien tongue. Oh, is that a deep speech? Yeah, it is actually. Oh, I speak that, I cast comprehend languages. Yeah. Now I speak it. I cast tongues. I ask him how his wife is.
Yeah. I took the invocation, like the one that lets you read all the languages possible. And now I read the ancient hieroglyphs. What do they say?
Yeah. I definitely think Warlock is one of the ones you might want to consider taking off the table. And there's a few lineages you might want to consider taking off the table if you really want to make Cthulhu or Cthulhu-esque games happen.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Here's the thing. You can still play in all the trappings of cosmic horror, but like make it funny or just make it adventurous.
That's what I mean by aesthetic. When you only apply it as an aesthetic, you can have a fun campaign with mind flayers.
Yeah.
Killing these goofy little brain heads.
Yeah, like what if you're like a great old one warlock and you're like, but like Cthulhu doesn't care about you, and that's really funny, right? Because like you're kind of playing like an unpaid intern at the corporation. You know what I mean?
But also like you get all the benefits. You keep leveling up, but Cthulhu keeps not even knowing that you exist.
And I feel like you could make a very humorous sort of thing out of that, where like nobody cares what you have to say or takes you very seriously, right? Because you're Cthulhu's unpaid intern. But you're like, hey guys, look, I can summon all this shit. Or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I meant by aesthetic. It's like we just discard all the themes.
Yeah.
We just go straight to like the look.
Yeah.
Because Lovecraftian horror, to a certain degree at this point, has turned into an aesthetic as well. It's like...
Yeah, I mean, I remember like it was like an interview, I think with Taliesin Jaffe from Critical Role, where he was like, I don't like cosmic horror that you can name drop. Right? Cosmic horror kind of always has to be unknown. And if it becomes too popular and too well known, it kind of automatically becomes parody of itself.
I have a friend whose cat is named Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos.
Yeah, so you want
true story.
Yeah, you want cosmic horror that you can't name drop.
Yeah.
Or we mentioned it a little bit earlier, just because the cosmic horror elements of the campaign that we play are very heavily inspired by Magic the Gathering. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to talk briefly about that? Because I think they do cosmic horror in an interesting way.
I mean, yeah, I think the thing with cosmic horror in the Eldrazi, which is the part of Magic the Gathering lore that we adapt.
If we're going to talk about them, we should probably explain what they are, because not all the audience will know.
The Eldrazi, from the way I understand it. Maybe I'll start and then you can compliment me. But like they're essentially interplanar gods. No, not gods, creatures, who essentially exist to consume a plane by stripping it of its fundamental aspects, its life, its physical laws, and its reality.
Yeah.
So they eat at different layers of physical and metaphysical reality, essentially,
Yeah.
until the plane falls apart and just dissolves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so Magic the Gathering has this multiverse of planes,
Yeah.
right? And there's this space between planes that
the blind eternities.
exactly the blind eternities that like only planeswalkers can traverse. Planeswalkers are sort of the protagonists of the narratives of Magic the Gathering generally, and when you play the game, you are embodying the role of a planeswalker. So there's a lot of those old ads that are like, "You are a planeswalker," you know. Anyways, these blind eternities, nothing lives there. It's not even really a place, you know. It's like it's a place the way a doorway is a place, and yet we don't know how many there are, but very few. It sounds like, right? We know like of 3, and like you said, they sort of have different elements of how they eat and how they. But you know, in Magic, everything is made of these 5 colors of mana, and basically they're colorless. They eat mana. You know, that's kind of the baseline concept.
Yeah, and I feel like what makes the Eldrazi work, what makes them interesting, but also a bit removed from like the traditional Lovecraft mythos, is how simple they are.
Yeah.
There is no unknowable motivation, or at least usually there isn't.
Yeah.
Usually it's simply they're here to eat,
Yeah.
they will feast, and then they will move on. And what makes them scary is how big and essentially undefeatable they are.
Yeah.
Most things in Magic operate on the level of like a plane.
Yeah.
And these things are like 1 tier bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's like being a little fish and then a whale shows up.
And yeah, I think they have a lot of the aesthetics of cosmic horror without having as many of the themes. Although there are elements about them that are unknown, the general, I mean, we just gave you a pretty comprehensive rundown. I don't think I could tell you that much about Cthulhu, right? I think we never really get to see that far past the curtain.
Interesting thing about Cthulhu is that like he's not a god, he's a priest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember that. Like, he's kind of like a Morgoth Sauron situation. All the Lovecraft nerds tell you, "Oh, you think Cthulhu's scary? You haven't even heard of, you know."
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah.
But like the Eldrazi, like you said, they're pretty knowable, and they're kind of a little less psychic-y and a little bit more brute forcey. There is actually a set where they do lean a little bit more cosmic horror, and there's sort of an investigation, and you don't know why everyone's going crazy and having these physical corruptions. And in the end, it's revealed in the second set, oh yeah, it is actually, there's an Eldrazi, and she's here. Emrakul is eating.
But even then, she like teleports herself into the moon.
Yeah.
And then we don't know why.
Exactly. So there's like a kind of a little bit of an unknowable
That's what I was
motivation
alluding
there.
to when I said for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
Knowable.
So there's a little bit of an unknowable motivation in that one point, and there is kind of a mystery. But most of the time, the Eldrazi are pretty loud. If they're on your plane, you know it. And what they want, you also know. And how to fight them, you kind of know. They're interactable with, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The 2 main Eldrazi Titans that were killed were burned to death, right? So it is possible, you know, that you see how they violate many of the things we've said are sort of common of cosmic horror. Mm-hmm. They're pretty knowable. They're pretty interactable with. But I find that they still make for pretty compelling villains, nonetheless. So
yeah, exactly.
Magic the Gathering, I feel, shows that you can borrow the aesthetics of cosmic horrors, not the themes, and still make a fun and compelling story.
No, for sure.
It's not I don't want to give the impression it's not a cheap or second-rate thing to just borrow the aesthetics of something, but do the themes of a different story. If your themes are still good, why not?
No, absolutely. I didn't mean to sound demeaning about the idea of borrowing the aesthetic, but that obviously borrowing the aesthetic is kind of like the quick and easy solution to this problem.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, you can still write great fiction like that.
Yeah.
But when you just say, let's borrow the aesthetic, easy.
Yeah. No, I mean, I also didn't feel like you necessarily like demeaned the point too much.
Yeah.
It's just like a
like,
point
I
I wanted
love
to
mind
make.
flayers. I don't think mind flayers make actually for
a little too much. It's a little unhealthy how much you love mind flayers.
Listen, I cannot say no to such a well-written monster with so many interesting like ideas. When the Saladi have a brink of like curiosity added to them.
Yeah, Slutty suck.
Slutty suck. And to be fair, demons are like, all right.
I think demons could be done a lot better. I feel like this is a total side tangent, But I think demons work really well as small enemies, as hordes of enemies.
So, with this being said, I want to bring the question. I will ask you first.
Do you want to play in my Cosmic Horror campaign?
Yeah, exactly. You already do. It's not really horror horror, it's dark fantasy, but fine. So, how would you do it? With all this said and done,
Yeah.
If I told you you have to write a campaign that is centered around cosmic horror, what's your big idea?
I would try to find a group that has never played D&D before. I think that is the best way to do it.
Absolutely.
If I can't do that, I have to invent a whole bunch of psychic or cosmic stat blocks and stuff. And then I would do the Infinity Blade plot device, which is that your character can die over and over and over again and keeps coming back to life. And you don't know why. But not like cute resurrection, not like Jesus resurrection. Like you're fully dead and destroyed, and the clone juices get drained out of the tank, and another clone walks out who thinks it's you, and you get to keep playing that character. And I would kill your characters all the time. And I would also explain to you as a player that this is part of the fun. And if you didn't think that was fun, then we wouldn't play this. We would play something else. But
would you do the first time shock, or would you let them know in advance?
Yeah, no, I think I would keep it as a somewhat of a surprise. So I would let them know if somebody dies, it's okay. It's part of the game. And then I would kill them way earlier than they thought. I think my misdirection would be like, and if somebody dies at some point, it's okay. It's part of the game. Don't worry. I have a plan. We'll talk about it then. We'll figure it out then. And they'll be like, all right, cool. And then night one, I would kill somebody.
One of my favorite moments, and probably one of my favorite sessions, was when we did when we played the one shot. Well, one shot campaign that we have running, kind of.
Yeah.
In our second session, we were just.
I mean, we don't have it
2.
running. It's been years, but
no, not that one.
Oh,
this one, the one with the tarot cards.
Oh,
yeah. In our second session, we're all level 2, and I was the DM, where I'm playing, by the way, a mind flayer.
Yes,
a mind flayer character. And I dropped on one of my favorite moments was when you were all like kind of investigating why my character was behaving in a weird way, and all of a sudden you enter this cave and you see like my mind flayer is tending to like an injured elder brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Which to you was like, oh my god, there is another brain and we're level 2, and I was like, yeah. Welcome to the And that was interesting because suddenly it was not like we can fight this. Like obviously it has a stat block. It's knowable, another brain, but it was at the very least I generated the mystery, the tension, and then the reveal was, oh, we cannot fight this. We have no chance to fight this.
I think that's one of the things I would have to, in my version of what I just pitched, one of the things I would have to settle with the players is, are you okay losing this campaign, in quotation marks?
That's true.
Are you willing spending years fighting against this corruption, and in the end you lose? Because for the themes of cosmic horror, you kind of have to. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to lose. You can't win against Cthulhu. That's kind of the point. That's what makes it scary, you know? So the other day I was in a game store and I was reading the beginning of Into the Odd, which is a rule system I want to learn more about. And it says Bastion is the only city that matters, and it's surrounded by this corrupted wasteland. I think I would borrow something like that. I mean, obviously, I'm a sucker for this trope anyways, but Magitech City in the middle of a barren wasteland being encroached upon by this cosmic horror invasion. And it starts small and it gets bigger and bigger, and a chosen few, get to be these deathless, which is actually a shitty job. It's actually awful because you keep going out and dying and coming back to life, and it's painful and traumatizing, and you never die of old age. So everyone has been dead for so long. They don't know how to make more deathless anymore. So, and some people are like disillusioned with you, and like they don't like you the way they don't like Witchers in the Witcher setting.
Maybe, yeah.
And then I feel like that would be, we could use a lot of cosmic horror themes, because like your civilization could literally be falling, and I can do a lot of weird corrupted shit, and I can kill you guys all the time, and the stakes are real, because if I kill you while you're on mission, you're not there for the rest of the mission, right? So like, you really don't want to die on mission. Of course, I kind of as the DM have to make sure you don't die until like the climax maybe, or like at a point where it's reasonable, Yeah. But that's, I think, sort of what I would work with, and sort of what I would try to make happen. And I think you could make an interesting enough cosmic horror camp. The only thing I wouldn't look forward to is having to make up my whole own magic systems. But then maybe if they're new players, maybe I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I could just use Tasha's mind whip, and they'll be like, "Fucking whoa, what the?"
An intelligence saving throw, unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. Because they've never played before. They'll be like, "Wow, that's so crazy! That guy could teleport." It's like, yeah, Misty Step is a hell of a spell.
It's interesting. By the way, I feel like my version of the campaign would be that halfway through you find out that like your little town is actually like a mind flayer experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 20 other towns, and they're all like different experiments.
Yeah. Where have I heard that before? That is conceptually very similar to your current campaign.
In a way. Yeah. Well, I mean, yes and no, but yeah.
I mean, in your campaign, the other experiments aren't run by mind flayers, but we're basically the mind flayer experiment.
But they're not really an experiment.
Yeah, not really. More like civilizations and colonies, but they are kind of like...
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm more talking about would be the idea that, like, the thing on the outside and the thing on the inside are the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, in my campaign, the outside does want to kill you.
Yeah.
And, like, Yeah. Anyways. But yeah, where did you hear that before? Yeah, exactly. It's a trope that I like.
But so that's how you would do it?
No. I'm not just gonna take your thing on. I will change that one thing. No, I mean, I don't know exactly about settings wise. I think I would maybe try to set this more in a low magic setting, but maybe more traditional. I would definitely try to use misdirection. Like maybe in the beginning it feels like it's gonna be about phase because all these people go missing in the phase. I also told you about like kind of like a pitch that I had where people keep going missing in the forest and then they come back and their memories are gone. It's like, oh, that feels like classic phase shenanigans. And then, oh no, every single person who came back has a little worm in their brain and they're all gonna go off at the same time. But no, what I thought while I was typing up the bullet points for this episode is kind of like there's already a trope of D&D built in which makes this actually fairly easy to circumvent a lot of the issues of cosmic horror. That's cultists. You don't fight the aberrations for a very long time. You follow the trail of cultists. You see a lot of like weird stuff you don't understand. You fight them. You storm their little subterranean lair, and you find a bunch of notes that don't make any sense, or they had the time to burn it all, and all that is left is like pieces. You don't get it. You find some freaky body horror stuff, but it's already like dead and gone. It's used up. You plant these seeds, and in the meantime, you can fight the cultists, which are perfectly acceptable like enemies to just like be able to fight without being like, oh, it's not cosmic horror anymore. No, I mean cultists are a part of Lovecraft thing. Usually you don't fight them. Usually you just read about them. But you can have them.
Usually they kind of take care of themselves.
Exactly. Usually they don't know what a shit deal they have until the deal hits.
And then like usually you're like, oh man, this guy is really awful, and he's dead. Okay, cool. So nothing for me as an adventurer to take care of.
Yeah, exactly. And you can have supernatural powers in the cultists. Without that can already kind of give you a hint of what you're dealing with. And like you don't reveal the monster until really late. And when you reveal the monster, it needs to feel proper. You make it feel like proper. Like this is something else. We've never fought this before. And also, I think it's important, keep it low level. Like, get to the resolution quickly. Get to the part where you have to stop the summoning. And perhaps the whole point is stopping the summoning. Perhaps if the summoning happens, it's already too late or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of almost in a way also a cheap answer, but it is an important thing to keep in mind. Just shorten the campaign. And like as a one-shot, it works pretty well, right? So if it's only like, a couple levels or something like that. If it's a 2-month campaign or a 4-month campaign, you could probably make it work pretty well. It's more like if you really want to turn it into a multi-year campaign that you start to run into a lot of the issues. But based on what you said, I'm going to revise my answer also a little bit, right? In Candela Obscura, their whole world building system is like there's New Fair, and under New Fair is Old Fair, right? And Old Fair has like all this weird technology and like cultist sort of stuff going on, and it's sort of we buried the past and didn't think about it, but the past bleeds into the present, and that's why we need this secret investigator ring. I think maybe instead of doing a city in a wasteland, I might do a city like that. and have you investigate something. And this,
A city on top of another city. Where I've heard that from you before.
I don't know.
I mean, it's your next campaign,
Yeah,
right?
I know. Well, I mean, that's also a city, a Magitech city in the middle of a wasteland in a way. So yeah,
It's all of it.
I know what I like. I know what I like. Get off my back.
Oh, okay, you get off my back, my fucking mind flayer addiction, okay? I will keep snorting little Cthulhu's until I'm dead.
All right, I'm just. My thing is normal. You have a problem.
Yeah, you have a system. You have a system.
I can stop whenever I want. But yeah, I think I would do that. Like,
Are you hiding in a city, a Magitech city in a wasteland behind your back, Leah?
shut up.
Stand up.
No,
Stand up.
shut up. But yeah, so I think that's what I would do. Maybe old city on top of that new city, and then have them investigate the cultists like you. I might ramp it up a little earlier though. But whatever this clone creating bodies of you technology is, I would have them sort of stumble into it. And like they're like, oh, I touched the touchpad, and it's like it scans you and it hurts, and all of a sudden, like you see, it's taking like a little blood sample from you, and
Let's say a little one.
yeah, and it starts growing.
big one.
It starts growing from like this. It starts growing these clones, and then like I would do like a time skip in which I would narrate how maybe like you're hungrier than usual or you're thirstier than usual. You know, for each of them, I think I would give them a different like sort of thing, and it's like, yeah, like this thing is like eating you and creating copies of you. And then for the higher level adventure where you start to face cosmic things and I'm just going to start fucking killing you, now I've got set up my plot device MacGuffin that is kind of horrific, you know, are sort of the prestige horrific, you know, but at the same time means you're not constantly rolling up new characters with no memories, you know, and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And then by the end of it, you can be the city in the middle of the wasteland encroached by cosmic horror trying to fight your way through.
Or not. Could be something else.
It could be some. Well, where else would you take it? If you had the city, wouldn't you want to destroy it? And all the area around it?
I mean, sure, maybe.
Maybe.
Also not?
Also not?
No.
Okay.
You could also open a big portal over it or under it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like
you
that.
can have, you know.
Swallow the whole city?
Swallow the whole city.
Oh, plane swap.
Oh, teleport the whole city to a different.
Yeah.
Bring it to the, you know, what is it?
Far realm.
Fall into Avernus? No.
Oh,
Descent into Avernus.
Yeah.
That's kind of the deal in that story.
Yeah,
right?
but do it with the far realms.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that is true. But yeah, one last thing that I was thinking. I like your idea of bringing someone back over and over again.
Yeah.
I might go more cosmic horror and have them awaken somewhere. Like, I don't know if it would be like always the same place, like some cave made of human bones, or like a weird gelatinous room of blood, or if it was just like you wake up in your bed.
Yeah. What if that's how the campaign started?
But like
that's a hell of a cold open, and they don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be like it's not a machine bringing you back.
Yeah,
it's also the cosmic horror bringing you back.
Yeah,
like something is keeping you alive. Something wants you to keep doing what you're doing, and you don't know. Is it the same thing that you're fighting?
Yeah,
is it a different thing?
Is this like a pact with the devil, but for good things thing? Or is this like you are a complete fool? You are an agent. You are an agent of the thing you think you are fighting. Situation.
Yeah, exactly. So I think.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's better. And it would be really cool actually to just do that as the cold open, at least for some of the characters. Like they don't know what happened before that death and having that. And they don't know anything right now. And that really lets them be these fresh-eyed lambs in your cosmic horror world.
Yeah.
Right, and they come out of the blood room. It's so awful. And it's just a normal city. And it's like, really? Yeah, it's just a normal city. People going about their day. Someone going into a bakery.
Yeah,
and you know, and then you're like,
and then they try to go back into their weird fleshy room, and it's gone.
Yeah, and it's like
there was never. It's a bakery. Yeah, what are you talking about?
You just turn around and it's just a stairwell and then a brick wall. What are you talking about? And it's like, no, there was a pathway there down into the awful. And then it's like, yeah. And the city is hungry. The city is regurgitating. You know, oh man, yeah, like some guy way back in the past made some deal that like his city would never die. And over this millennia, the city has really become an entity. And so whenever its defenders die, a certain select group of its defenders die, it spits them out over and over and over. And they don't know this, you know, but like, they can come to find this out. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, you're already describing something that is actually, again, like you're slipping again into like, oh, now it's knowable again. Like you can.
Well, no, I'm saying that's like, I always like to know in the back of my head.
I mean, as the dungeon master.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't know. They're just like, this city is like You know,
Yeah.
this, I love the idea of a city that eats people. You know, like the boardwalk itself judges your soul and decides, oh yeah, this widowed mother of two is not really contributing to the economic efficiency of the city. So the lamppost just fucking like.
Like, think about, like, you're walking at night and like the lamp, like the light kind of like turns towards you.
Yeah. Like, it feels like the houses are watching
Yeah,
you.
all of the street lights are facing you. All of them you can see, and as you move, they're like, like.
And then if the city was just the lesser of two evils, and
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? I think that could work really well.
Yeah. I mean, I like the machine. I like the machine thing. I feel like the machine thing goes more into like a body horror and like cybernetic horror. Not cybernetics, but like machine implants.
Yeah, you're right. No, it is like this kind of cyberpunky horror. Like, what makes you human?
Yeah, exactly.
If a machine can just print out infinite copies of you, what makes you? And that's the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also thinking like the body horror is psychic and like all things biological and creepy, and like at some point your technomagic city needs to like create Warforged, and like your player's consciousness gets moved into the machine. Like you have to become a machine because that's the only way to protect yourself from the body horror, but like it's irreversible. Now you're a robot forever.
And the dissonance that you would have from
it's thematically it's a big dissonance. But
no, I mean like the internal dissonance you would feel is like, this is not the right body, this is not what I'm used to.
And when they die, they can back you up. We have backups. We back you up. We just awaken a new body.
I think this is probably just a cool scene aesthetic in my head, but imagine just the forces of cosmic horror encroaching closer and closer to the city, and then they start taking the city block by block, and at the heart of the city, that's where this machine is. It just keeps printing you out, it starts to be, it's been like days since you were last killed, it's been hours since you were last killed, it's been minutes since you've been last killed. Now all of a sudden it's like, in a video game where you spawn, run out and die, spawn, run out, and in the end it takes the machine and the heart and everything with it, and then it's done. The campaign is over.
Or even like it stops waiting for you to die, just keeps printing a number of you.
Just in the last moment, it just starts boom, 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 as fast as it can. Yeah,
you don't even have the time to like go through the existential horror.
Yeah,
because like
you just start charging out there, and you're looking, and you see yourself like, could you imagine that mindfuck that you're seeing yourself from all these different perspectives at
dying
once,
all the time,
and it's just like, just run, and at some point, like almost your consciousness would take like almost a higher plane, right? Because you're feeling all these different bodies, you're seeing from all these different timelines at once.
Oh, okay. That's if you're sharing the
exactly. I think sharing it would be cooler, because then as a DM, when you're narrating, you could just zoom out and say, and blood and pain and chaos bleed into each other as you just feel the constant feeling of death and destruction and hurt, and then you stop feeling anything. And
then it all goes quiet all at once.
And then it all goes quiet.
Yeah.
And you're in the void, And it's like, oh my god, that was it. The city has been taken.
You need to have a long ass conversation with your players before you even start this campaign. If that's what you're planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
I think that would be pretty upset if you play for multiple years and then you don't actually win.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's also just the poetry of seeing the downfall. Maybe they don't feel a need to win.
I had an idea for.
I know I'm not like that though. I couldn't full disclosure. I don't think I could handle that.
I had an idea for a campaign that I scrapped, but it was basically like an alien invasion campaign where mind flayers are coming to invade from like space or like from the astral plane.
Mind flayers, you say?
Yeah, mind flayers. I say this came before Age of Extinction. This is so old, but yeah. And it kind of featured like the first half was very much like follow the cult, what's going on.
Yeah.
Then like the invasion comes, and it's like, okay, we don't stand a chance, so we're gonna send our heroes to the astral plane to see if there's somewhere else or something that we can learn.
Oh, like an Interstellar kind of situation?
Like, and then they come back, and kind of like Interstellar, big time skip. It's been like 200 years. All the NPCs except the elves are dead. The surface of the planet looks very different than when you left. And then,
it's like Planet of the Apes. They come back, but it's not. They don't know they come back.
Yeah, exactly. And like there would be like, and okay, now you have to become. We invented Warforged in the meantime.
Yeah,
get your brain in there.
Yeah, I see. This was all part of sort of. There's a couple of ideas that I already.
I mean, many years ago, I already went through this kind of like thought of like how we would do a large scale cosmic horror campaign.
Yeah.
But yeah. So when you were talking about it, this idea kind of was brought back.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it, to be honest. While I was typing this up, I hadn't actually thought about that old
Yeah.
campaign until you talk about Magical City in the middle of the wasteland. Huh.
Well, any final thoughts on Cthulhu and D&D or Lovecraft and D&D?
No, I think I said everything I wanted to say, except what could have been.
Yeah, what could have been? I think it was very interesting actually to hear about his life and have a little bit more nuance to sort of go off of there. And I think we ended up coming up with a pretty cool campaign concept actually.
Yeah, feel free to borrow it.
All right, you got any plugs?
The final season of What We Do in the Shadows is airing. It's interesting. I find that it's only season 6, and for a sitcom, I find that they have a good way to make every season unique and change it. It's not endless repetition of the same.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting. It's always, what if vampires did this, basically, and that's the season. And I think it's a solid season. And I think that generally it's a very good show. If you don't know, it's basically a mockumentary about the very domestic, mundane life of a group of like vampires from Europe and Asia, from the old world, that have migrated to America, to Staten Island, and never left. And it's based on an independent movie by Taika Waititi, who is also still involved in the show. It's very good. I'm plugging it.
All right. I don't think I got anything to plug this week, so that'll just about do it for episode 6 of the podcast. You can find us on youtube.com/@afriendlyorbit, as well as on Spotify and hopefully eventually Apple Podcasts. We're making progress very slowly with Apple support. And if you happen to have any astral echoes or feedback you want to share with us, you can reach us at afriendlyorbit@gmail.com, all one word.
All right, series. I'll talk to you later. And to all of our fellow Voyagers, we will catch you out there amongst the stars.
How long is this fucking recording?
It's not that long, honestly. It's 1 hour and 16 minutes. We
gotta wrap this up.
Do we?
I gotta edit this, man. Come on. Take it.
I have mercy on you.
When I edit these episodes, I basically need to listen to the whole episode like 1.5 times.
Okay. I'll wrap it up now.